The door to the first-class cabin swung open, and in an instant, the atmosphere changed. Not because someone had announced the arrival of a VIP, it didn't need to be. Simply put, when someone deemed not belonging here stepped inside, the air automatically tightened. Dr. Aria Bennett, 38 years old, tall and poised, her hair neatly tied in a bun, a glossy black suitcase rolling beside her like a silent declaration, entered the cabin. Inside, 10 pairs of eyes flicked toward her like sharp blades before retreating, feigning politeness, yet heavy with suspicion. All those eyes whispered the same cold question. How did she get in here? Aria didn't bother to answer. Her whole life she had known stairways built for others that slammed shut in front of her. She tugged lightly at her sleeve and moved straight to seat 1A by the window. That seat was not just a place to sit, but territory she had chosen, where she could look out over the sky and reorder the world on her own schedule. Setting her briefcase by her feet, crossing one leg over the other, Aria unlocked her phone as if the cabin itself were her private office. Everything remained still until the familiar sound of arrogance broke the silence. A dry cough, the adjustment of a suit jacket, then a male voice, sharp as a verdict, cutting through the air. "Excuse me, I think you're in the wrong seat. This is first class." Charles Whitman, 50, 5 years old, silver hair combed neatly, a Swiss watch gleaming like the sun, tilted his head with a thin smile. It was no smile of warmth, but one like a velvet-wrapped blade, slicing while pretending to be courteous. Aria lifted her eyes, calm and direct. "No, I'm not in the wrong seat." Charles sniffed, clearing his throat like a judge preparing to deliver sentence. "This is first class, and I know that perfectly well." The air froze. Other passengers shifted slightly, pretending not to listen, but with ears taut as strings. 2 rows back, Valerie Pierce leaned forward, her expensive perfume and linen dress radiating elegance. Her voice was sweet, but carried a hidden knife. "Perhaps the gate agent scanned your ticket incorrectly. It happens sometimes. They'll sort it out soon." Aria exhaled softly through her nose, neither smiling nor wavering. "I'm sure they'll sort it out just fine." Her phone lit up, displaying a calendar bursting with colors. Keynote speech, 2 closed-door meetings, a diplomatic dinner. A world she had built with her own intellect and decisions. At that moment, Tessan Gwen, a young flight attendant new to the job, approached with a cautious smile and a tray of welcome drinks. Her eyes darted quickly between passengers, like someone trying to walk through the rain without getting wet. "Would you like still or sparkling water, ma'am?" "Still, thank you," Aria replied, her voice soft yet firm. Charles cut in loudly, his tone ringing out as if to assert dominance. "Sparkling for me." His voice carried the weight of a proclamation, as though his choice mattered more. Tessa nodded gently, placing the glass for Aria, before turning away. But her steps faltered, a beat of tension. She lowered her head, speaking quietly. "I'm sorry, ma'am. May I see your boarding pass again?" Aria wasn't surprised. She had long grown used to moments like this, when people tried to turn her very presence into a question. Yet she handed over her ticket without anger or haste. The scanner beeped, a crisp, cold, decisive sound. Tessa flushed slightly, murmuring, "Thank you. Everything is completely in order." Arya nodded lightly, her gaze softening, a silent pardon for the young woman's unease. Charles shrugged with a mocking chuckle. He turned to Tessa, refusing to look at Arya. You see why I was confused. Standards still need to be maintained. Valerie smiled again, her expression as if she spoke for the entire cabin. Don't take it personally. It's nothing against you. Nothing personal. Arya drew a slow breath, eyes drifting toward the window, sunlight glinting on the airplane's wing. Yet in her mind, a truth rang clear. People only say nothing personal when it is, in fact, the most personal thing. Outside, luggage carts rolled past, their orange reflective vests glowing like tiny stars. A tableau of quiet labor, efficient and uncelebrated. Arya smiled faintly. The real world was not in judgments cast inside a cabin, but in the work carried out beyond it. Then a child's voice pierced the tension, scattering the frozen air. "Mom, look, a pilot!" Leo Brooks, a bright-eyed 7-year-old in the bulkhead row, stared at her suitcase. Arya met his gaze. There was no suspicion, no prejudice, only innocent curiosity. "Miss, is that bag heavy?" "Sometimes it is," Arya replied with a small smile. "What's inside it?" "Work." The boy paused, thought deeply, then declared, "If you like your work, then it's not heavy." Arya blinked, startled by the simple truth. The invisible weight pressing on her seemed to ease. She nodded. "You're right." Charles shook his head with a smirk, and Valerie adjusted her silk scarf, pretending to be occupied. But only Arya understood. The child's words held the deepest truth of all. The cabin door sealed shut with a firm thud. Passengers turned away, feigning disinterest. Yet each pair of eyes carried the imprint of the woman who had taken seat 1A. None of them knew that the woman they had dismissed was, in fact, the figure who controlled the digital infrastructure of half a continent. A woman whose single decision could redirect the flow of data through millions of households. And before this flight landed, they would come to realize another truth. The standards they believed themselves to be guarding were already resting in the hands of the very woman they had underestimated most. The engines roared to life, vibrations running down the steel frame of the aircraft. The plane tilted slightly, slowly lifting from the runway. The golden lights of Geneva shrank into tiny dots, fading behind the window. In the first-class cabin, a few passengers let out faint sighs of relief, followed by the soft clicks of reclining seats and unfastened seatbelts. The atmosphere seemed calm, but for Dr. Arya Bennett, the real storm had just begun. Directly across from her, Charles Whitman raised a glass of red wine, swirling it slowly, his voice carrying as if lecturing the entire cabin. "There are people who act as if the rules don't apply to them." He never looked directly at Arya, but everyone knew who his words were aimed at. The statement echoed, carefully designed to draw silent agreement from the other passengers. Arya never lifted her eyes from her tablet. Her fingers moved steadily, editing line by line in her keynote. When she spoke, her voice was even and sure, not loud, not sharp, but cutting clean through the heavy air. There are those who forget that rules are meant to serve, not to exclude. Charles froze for a beat. He let out a mocking laugh, sharp and dismissive. "Ah, so you're one of those, the disadvantaged, always believing the world is against you." Arya looked up, her dark eyes piercing straight through like an arrow. No, I'm one of those who pays. The cabin went silent. Charles's smile stiffened, his wine glass frozen mid-air. He opened his mouth to respond, but found no words solid enough to withstand hers. Arya returned to her speech. On her screen, the opening line glowed. We are not anomalies. We are the evidence. She knew those words would be the spear point tearing open the hall tomorrow. Outside, the sky deepened into night. The seatbelt sign flicked off, and flight attendants began their service. Tessa and Gwyn, young and careful, reappeared. Ma'am, would you like to order something before dinner? Peppermint tea, Arya answered evenly. Charles cut in, his voice deliberately louder than necessary. A bottle of champagne, and make sure it's ice cold. The words hung heavy, another attempt at asserting dominance. But this time, Tessa didn't glance at him first. She looked straight at Arya. A small gesture, but Arya noticed the balance had shifted. The steaming tea was set down before her, the warmth rising like a shield. Arya lifted it, inhaling deeply. The clean, sharp scent of peppermint filled her chest, slicing through the stale arrogance clinging to the air. Thank you, she said softly. Tessa lowered her eyes, and for a moment, gratitude flickered, grateful to be acknowledged for making the right choice. From the row ahead, a child's voice rang out, bright and innocent, breaking the tension. Mom, look, a pilot. 7-year-old Leo Brooks, his round face glowing, pointed toward the cockpit door. Arya smiled without meaning to. Children rarely turned away. They looked straight, unashamed of their curiosity. Leo's small finger shifted toward her case, resting by her feet. Is it heavy? Arya tilted her head, her tone gentle. Sometimes. What's inside? Work. The boy paused, thought hard, then declared firmly. If you like your work, then it's not heavy. The cabin trembled again, but Arya felt herself lighten. She smiled. You're right. His mother, Anna Brooks, pulled him back gently, murmuring an apology to Arya. But Arya only shook her head. It's fine, that was a perfect reminder. Charles watched, sneering under his breath. Valerie Pierce, elegant in her linen dress, leaned forward, her voice sugary but edged with disdain. Charming, but the real lessons don't come from children. Arya didn't answer. In her mind, Leo's words had already become a charm. Work only weighs you down when it lacks love. The plane leveled off, the cabin settling into the rhythm of flight. Keystrokes tapping, the soft murmur of a couple nearby, the gentle pour of wine. Arya adjusted her notes, each word, each space precise. Small details, but they were her way of keeping control. Behind her, Valerie leaned forward again, her tone laced with false sympathy. You know, sometimes gate agents make mistakes. I'm sure they'll realize soon, and everything will be set in its proper place. Arya lowered her tablet, her gaze cold. I am certain everything will be in its proper place. Valerie shivered. That tone was not a reply. It was a warning. At that moment, Daniel Roth, the purser, walked past. His eyes flicked briefly over the row. Aria in 1A, Charles in 1C, Valerie behind them. A crease appeared on his brow, the familiar mark of someone who had witnessed this scene too many times, prejudice disguised as standards. But he straightened, keeping his professional composure. The plane was still in flight, and he had his duty to perform. As the cabin lights dimmed, signaling dinner service, Aria drew in a deep breath. She knew the real test wasn't over. She had kept her seat, kept her voice. But no one yet knew that this flight still held another procedure waiting. And this time, it would not just be scornful stares. It would be the weight of an entire system, pressing to see whether she truly belonged in seat 1A. The engines rumbled steadily as the plane pierced through the deep blue sky. The cabin trembled slightly, the glass of water on the tray shimmering in the light. Passengers began unbuckling their seatbelts, screens lit up, and the sound of drink orders echoed through the air. Everything seemed to fall back into routine. But for Dr. Aria Bennett, that calm was nothing more than a thin veneer. Because Charles Whitman's gaze had yet to leave her. He leaned back, speaking half to his glass of wine and half loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. There are some people who behave as though the rules don't apply to them. Aria did not look up. Her fingers glided across her tablet, refining the words for her keynote. Her reply dropped sharp and clean. There are some people who forget that rules are meant to serve, not to exclude. The cabin froze for a beat. Charles let out a mocking laugh, as though she had just confessed to a flaw. "Ah, so you are one of those discontented types. Always thinking the world treats you unfairly." Aria lifted her eyes, black and unwavering, and struck back with a single line. "No, I am the type who pays." Her words cracked through the air like the click of a trigger. Charles faltered, his mouth opened and shut, his smile stiffening. No one in the cabin laughed with him. Aria lowered her gaze back to the screen. Her opening line glowed clear. "We are not anomalies. We are the evidence." That single sentence was strong enough to hold up an auditorium of thousands tomorrow, and sharp enough to crush the smug grins in this very moment. A light shudder rippled through the plane. Glasses clinked together. The seatbelt sign lit up. Passengers scrambled to buckle in. A few startled gasps slipped out. Aria calmly fastened her belt, eyes fixed on the wing, slicing through the black sky. When the turbulence eased, the cabin filled once more with murmurs and the glow of screens. That was when Tessa Nguyen, the young flight attendant, approached, her expression tighter than usual. She leaned close, voice barely above a whisper. "Madame, when you have a moment, the purser would like to see you up front. It's just a formality." Aria closed her tablet and rose with deliberate calm. The aisle suddenly felt narrower, pressed in by the invisible weight of every watching eye. Glances flickered with satisfaction. Aha, finally exposed. Charles smirked, his fingers drumming the armrest as if waiting for her fall. Aria followed Tessa into the forward galley. There stood Daniel Roth, the veteran purser, posture upright, hands clasped before him. His face was calm, but his eyes betrayed unease. "Apologies for the interruption," Daniel began, his voice professional, as though reading from a script. "We've had a system irregularity. To be certain, We need to reconfirm several first-class seats. Arya tilted her head. Several seats? Daniel's tone stayed even. Yes. We ask to see your boarding pass, ID, and if possible, the original form of payment. In that instant, the air thickened. At 36,000 feet, suspended above the world, this woman was being asked to prove she deserved the seat that had been hers from the start. Arya smiled, thin and cold. Here in the sky. You want proof I paid? Daniel swallowed hard. I understand this is inconvenient. Indeed, Arya replied, opening her wallet. She handed over her boarding pass. The scanner beeped green. Her ID, a perfect match. Then, from a hidden slot, she slid out a card. Not the metal ones so common among business travelers, but a heavy, solid black card, the kind few had ever seen. It gleamed quietly, authority without pretense. She placed each item neatly before Daniel, every motion measured, unyielding. Daniel entered the number. The system blinked, then confirmed. His shoulders eased with relief. Thank you. Everything is in order. We appreciate your patience. Arya's gaze locked on him. Do you record each case where reconfirmation is required? Daniel hesitated. Yes. Then make sure this one is noted. Their eyes met, a silent flash of lightning. I will. The cockpit door clicked open softly. Captain Henrik Vogel stepped out on routine inspection. His eyes swept the galley, pausing on Arya and the black card still on the counter. For a moment, recognition flickered, not admiration, but understanding. This was someone whose presence carried weight far beyond that of an ordinary passenger. Is there an issue? He asked, his voice calm and steady. Resolved, Captain, Daniel replied quickly. Vogel's gaze lingered on Arya, offering a discreet nod of respect. Then he returned to the cockpit. Tessa carefully returned each document. Thank you, she murmured, her voice close to apology. Arya tucked everything neatly back into her wallet, her eyes resting on Tessa. You did your job. That is enough. Tessa exhaled, relief spreading into a quiet smile. Arya turned and walked back down the aisle, each step firm, like someone leaving a courtroom in the sky. The cabin fell silent. Some lowered their eyes, feigning distraction, while others stared openly, challenging. But all knew the truth had just been revealed. Charles tilted his head, voice dragging. All finished, then? Arya answered cleanly, without looking up from her tablet. It's been recorded. The hum of the engines filled the cabin. Beyond the window, moonlight spread across the sky. But inside, something else had just been sealed. Not just a credit card, but an identity and a power that no one could deny. As Dr. Arya Bennett walked back down the aisle, the first-class cabin was gripped by a suffocating silence. No one spoke, but every pair of eyes clung to her, the woman who had just forced the entire system to acknowledge she belonged. The sound of her heels tapped lightly against the carpet, each step unhurried, deliberate, as if the narrow aisle itself had become a corridor of honor. Some passengers quickly lowered their gaze, pretending to be absorbed in magazines or glowing screens. Others held their stare, but the light in their eyes had changed, uneasy, uncertain. Charles Whitman leaned back, swirling his glass of red wine as if he had not just been silenced by the sharp green flash of a scanner. "Oh, so everything's been sorted out?" His voice dripped with arrogance, though a trace of discomfort edged his tone, one he himself likely wished to deny. Arya did not look at him. She answered simply, firmly. "It's been noted." The words landed like a final gavel, sharp and decisive, leaving no room for more. She returned to seat 1A, reopened her tablet, and typed a few more adjustments. "We are not anomalies. We are the evidence." The words glowed on the screen like an oath written into the night. Yet prejudice never releases its grip so easily. A faint movement stirred behind her. Valerie Pierce, draped in linen, leaned forward, her eyes sharp with curiosity, her smile edged with steel. "And what program are you traveling for, dear?" "We're headed to a charity gala in Zurich. We often sponsor students. Quite lovely." Her words dripped with condescension, sweetened like honey over glass shards. Arya raised her head, voice steady, eyes unshaken. "I'm traveling for work. Just work." Valerie leaned in further, tone soaked with suggestion, as if dangling some privilege she assumed was out of reach. "Oh? And which company do you work for?" The cabin seemed to tilt toward the answer. Even Charles smirked, waiting for the stumble, the hesitation. Arya placed her glass gently down, her lips curving in the faintest smile. "My company." The space froze. Valerie blinked, her smile faltering mid-air, like someone forced to swallow something bitter. Charles coughed, masking his discomfort with a mocking laugh. "These days, everyone calls themselves a founder. Everyone claims to be their own boss." Arya did not respond. Her hand moved across the tablet, adding a single comma to her keynote. A small motion, yet one that reset the entire rhythm of the room. The tension broke when Tessa Nguyen returned. On her silver tray sat a steaming cup of peppermint tea. But her smile had changed. No longer timid, it carried a quiet gratitude. "Your tea, ma'am. If there is anything you need, please let me know directly." Arya accepted the cup, her voice low and warm. "Thank you, Tessa. You did your job right." The words sliced gently through the heavy air. Tessa's shoulders loosened, her smile blooming genuine. In her eyes, it was not just thanks, it was affirmation. Proof she was not alone in a cabin full of scrutiny. Arya lifted the cup. The rising steam filled her lungs, its cool sharpness cutting through the stale weight of arrogance lingering in the air. Patience is not weakness, she thought. Patience is another form of strength. Outside, the night fell deeper, the moon casting its glow across the wing. Inside, the cabin settled into the rhythm of long-haul flight. Whispers, blankets shifting, films flickering across tired faces. Inside her, the storm still roared, but the surface remained calm. She remembered the stairs when she boarded, Charles's smirk, Valerie's cutting voice, Tessa's trembling hands. She knew such moments would not disappear. They would repeat in different places, with different people. But every time, one more note would be recorded. One more correction entered into the ledger. The peppermint heat, the cold moonlight, two extremes merging in her chest. Charles muttered under his breath. His words meant for no one yet hanging heavy. The world has changed, but not always for the better. Arya heard it clearly, but she did not answer. Truth needs no debate. Truth exists by its own weight. Valerie turned toward the window, her lips pressed tight, her composure cracking. Meanwhile, Tessa passed by, leaving behind a fleeting smile. Small, but enough to prove that even among judgment, there was still recognition. Arya closed her eyes briefly, letting herself exhale. In her mind, Leo's voice returned. If you love your work, it isn't heavy. Yes, work could be heavy, but with enough love, that weight became a mission. And that mission, she realized, was not only waiting for her tomorrow on stage, but unfolding right now in seat 1A, the very seat so many thought she did not deserve. The wheels of the plane struck the runway with a solid thud. The cabin shook, and then came a chorus of relieved exhales, a collective prayer released into the air. First class quickly resumed its mask of polished composure. Jackets adjusted, hair smoothed, phones lit up. But Dr. Arya Bennett sat still. She never hurried. Haste only bred mistakes. As passengers scrambled to rise, Arya packed her things slowly, deliberately. Charles Whitman snapped his laptop shut, as if hoping to erase the truth that he had sat across from her the entire flight and lost the silent battle of stairs. Valerie Pierce reapplied lipstick in her compact mirror, but avoided looking directly at her own reflection. Only young Leo Brooks in the bulkhead waved energetically. "Bye-bye, miss." Arya raised 2 fingers in salute and smiled faintly. It was the most genuine farewell of the journey. The door opened. Morning air from Geneva rushed in, sharp with metal and carrying the pure chill of a city just waking up. Arya walked through the jet bridge, her suitcase rolling straight, her back unbent, her head unbowed. At immigration, glass walls gleamed. Officer Laurent Duval, tall and trained into neutrality, took her passport. Purpose of visit? Business. Length of stay? 3 days. The scanner blinked. The stamp landed with a soft finality. Bienvenue en Suisse. No smile, no praise, but also no suspicion. Arya nodded slightly, a silent thank you. At the Duron Hotel, the lobby gleamed with wood and stone, precise as a mathematical formula. The receptionist bowed. "Welcome. Name, please." "Bennett." The keyboard clicked. The clerk's eyes softened as the screen confirmed her details. "City View Suite. We'll need a card to secure incidentals." Arya handed over an ordinary card, not the heavy metal kind. She did so on purpose, to delay the world's reflex to shrink beneath her name. In her room on a high floor, walls of glass looked down on the Rhone. She did not unpack. She only hung a single suit, set a pair of polished shoes, those Leo had once called fast shoes, in perfect alignment, and placed her briefcase on the desk like a second heartbeat. A video call blinked open. Marcus Bennett, her husband, still at home. "You've arrived?" "Yes." Cool and precise, as Geneva always is. "Get some rest. Tomorrow you'll set the room on fire." Arya smiled. "That's the plan. Sleep now. I'll trade dinner for peppermint tea." The next morning, Arya joined the stream of black suits and lanyards heading toward the conference center. International flags whipped in the wind, volunteers handing out brochures as if distributing belief itself. Inside, a temporary city had been built. A stage, tech booths, lounges posing as living rooms. The speaker's check in desk sat in its own corner, as if guarding the threshold. Arya approached. The young attendant typed her name, paused, typed again as if doubting his own eyes. "May I see your ID, please?" She handed it over. The scanner blinked green. His hesitation dissolved. "Apologies, Mrs. Bennett. Here's your speaker badge. Lounge A3, tech check at 11. Your keynote. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. The badge felt heavy in her hand, as though it carried the weight of 1,000 eyes waiting in that hall. Arya nodded. "I'll be there." Backstage was a maze. Cables like vools, blackout curtains, swallowing light, control boards ticking like a quickened heartbeat. A woman with a high ponytail and 3 coffees in hand approached briskly. "Priya Shah, show caller. Let's move fast. Lapel mic or handheld?" "Lapel. Handheld as backup." "Slides?" "On my tablet." "Good. Stand on the white mark, the light will find you. Want a confident screen?" "No. I need silence." Priya raised her brows, smiled slightly. "I like you already." In a shadowed corner, a young woman, clutching a stack of brochures like a shield, approached timidly. "Excuse me. Are you Mrs. Bennett? I'm Nadia Kim, an intern. Last year, my group shared your talk on open infrastructure. It changed how we thought. I just wanted to say thank you." Arya's smile softened, genuine. "What's your field?" "Computer science, and a little bit of everything. It feels like too much sometimes." "That's how it should feel. The weight fades, then it returns. When it does, you'll know your work matters." Nadia inhaled, then whispered like asking for a secret. "What do you do right before you walk on stage?" Arya's gaze was steady, her voice deliberate. "I take 3 breaths. I choose the opening line. And I remember who I came to speak for." Nadia's eyes glowed, as though she had just been handed a sacred formula. "Thank you." Arya nodded, then turned toward the wings. Stage lights flickered. The murmur of the audience washed in like a distant tide. In one more day, the doors would open and every gaze would lock on her. But here, in the shadows of Geneva's backstage, Arya knew she was more than a speaker. She was living proof. The woman once doubted even in a seat she had paid for, now preparing to stand on a stage that would make the whole world nod in recognition. Lunch at the Geneva conference was always the same. Round tables draped in white cloth, silverware polished to a gleam, menus elaborate but tasteless. People did not come to eat. They came to be seen eating with someone. Dr. Arya Bennett walked in, her speaker badge glinting at her neck, her discreet smile like a thin wall. She sat beside a minor cabinet minister and a startup founder who repeated the word disruption as though it were a prayer. A salad appeared, loyal in its harmlessness. The door opened. Light spilled in with a familiar figure. Charles Whitman, the man who had confronted her from seat 1C, entered. His suit pressed, his silver-grey tie precise, his stride forceful. Yet in daylight, he looked smaller, more angular, like a statue that no longer belonged on its pedestal. He was led to the bankers' table, those who believed the world turned solely on Bloomberg numbers. Charles smiled, shook hands, but his eyes drifted. And then they caught Arya's. A pause. Not enough to be admission, but long enough to prove recognition. Arya only inclined her head slightly, her smile polite as a greeting to the weather. Charles lowered his gaze, suddenly absorbed by his wine glass, as though it were more interesting than anything else in the room. It was almost an apology, but not yet spoken. Beside Arya, another woman had sat down. Camilla Ortiz, 44, black curls, eyes so bright they looked capable of organizing a protest with a single furrow of her brow. Her voice rang firm, carrying the rhythm of Nairobi's squares where Arya had first met her. Arya, isn't it? We once shared a panel on equitable access. Camila, Arya nodded, remembering. She always remembered those who worked, not those who merely spoke. Camila smiled slightly, gesturing with her fork toward the adjacent hall where the afternoon session was set to unfold. That panel will be chaos. 2 regulators who despise each other, a platform director allergic to questions, and a journalist who thinks shouting is truth. Sounds interesting, Arya replied. Sounds long. More like it. Camila leaned closer, her voice dropping, her eyes glinting mischievously. Tonight we're hosting a private gathering. No press, no panels, just those who need the same reality. You should come. Arya raised an eyebrow. Address? I'll text you, but no conference masks allowed. Camila smiled, then lowered her tone further, almost to a whisper. And I heard about the flight. Arya's fork paused mid-air. News traveled quickly. No headlines, no social feeds. Yet in the hallways of the conference, the story of the woman asked to prove her place in first class had already become common whisper. People are quick to carry stories, Arya said lightly, unsurprised. They're also quick to choose sides, Camila added. For what it's worth, many admire how you handled it. Calm, but sharp. Arya sipped her water. I only did what could be done in that moment. Camilla lifted her glass, clinking lightly against Arya's as though sealing a secret. Tomorrow you won't just handle a moment. You'll handle an entire room. Their eyes locked. No more needed to be said. A silent pact was made across a table set with bland salad and exquisite bread. The afternoon stretched into panels that dragged on. Leaders dressed their power in empty words, while the audience hid yawns behind their papers. Arya remained, present, nodding, dropping one precise question that froze a speaker mid-sentence. Just one, but enough to prove she was not there to fill a seat. When sunset spilled gold across the Rhone, Arya left the conference center. She walked across the stone bridge. Geneva at day's end was hushed like a cathedral. Even a couple's quarrel about directions softened to a murmur. A boy feeding pigeons stood solemn as a small priest. In her hotel room, Arya stood before the glass wall, reciting her keynote once more. Her voice filled the silence, each sentence like a backbone, upright and steady. She struck out one excess phrase, leaving the script sharp as a blade. Her phone buzzed, a message from Camila. 19 Unquoque. This address. Don't wear heels. Geneva's cobblestones spare no one. Arya chuckled softly. She chose a simple black dress with deep pockets, That rare luxury denied to women too often. Flat shoes, because Camilla was right. By the time she stepped onto the street, Geneva's lights glowed golden, her figure blending into the crowd as if she were no one special. But the truth was, wherever she stepped that night, the pulse of the room would change. The townhouse was 3 stories, its facade ordinary, but the flow of people in and out moved with the urgency of those who had found a refuge. Arya knocked, and was pulled inside by Camilla's warm embrace. "Here she is, the one we've been waiting for." Arya arched a brow, half joking, half serious. "I'm not who you need. I'm just someone who speaks and leaves before the encore." "Exactly. That's why we need you." The living room had been cleared, chairs arranged in a circle. Faces gathered. A journalist once fired and rehired, a regulator from a country rarely named on maps, a founder confessing his product served no one who truly needed it. None wore the costume of saving the world. They only tried to keep the world from stumbling. When it was Arya's turn, she did not deliver a speech. Her voice was low, even, yet honed like a blade stripping peel. "Tomorrow, I will say something very simple. Not because simple is easier, but because it leaves less room for excuse. We are not asking to enter the room. We are marking that we are already here. If infrastructure does not see us, infrastructure is wrong. If the market does not value us, the market is wrong. If policy does not protect us, then policy is late." The room fell silent. Then a brief smile cut through like the storm passing from the lips of Ruth Delgado, the veteran journalist. "Good. Let them try to quote it without understanding, and then force them to understand." Arya sat down, listening to the others. But she knew. Tonight she was not just in Geneva. Tonight she had planted a spark for a rising tide. And tomorrow, when the lights of the stage ignited, the whole room would be forced to face the truth they had always tried to avoid. The stage lights fell like an artificial dawn. The opening applause faded quickly, leaving behind a silence, precious, deliberate, because Dr. Arya Bennett had asked for it. No music, no flashy introduction slides, only the silence necessary to give her first words their weight. She stood tall, small against the massive screen behind her, but her gaze was bright and deep, as if it could pierce through the 1,000 people sitting before her. "We are not anomalies," Arya began, her voice clear and resolute. "We are the evidence." No one moved. The words dropped, reverberated, then spread like a wave. Arya stepped forward once. "I want to begin not with rhetoric, but with how systems treat reality. Policy, market, and infrastructure, 3 gates that decide who is allowed in and who is left outside." The slide appeared, stark in its simplicity. 3 doors, labeled policy, market, infrastructure. No glittering effects, no theatrics. The first gate, policy, her voice steady, low. "If the law names us, it protects us. If the law is swanned, we disappear in the paperwork. This is not debate. This is data. When the name is missing, the person becomes a blank." A few subtle nods. Pens began to move. The second gate, market. When demand is not measured, it becomes invisible. The market praises itself for efficiency, but in truth, it is only painting over its blindness. That is not efficiency. That is deficiency disguised as virtue. A ripple of laughter sounded from one corner of the room. Some nodded, some frowned. Arya pressed on unfazed. The third gate. Infrastructure. This is my home. Her voice slowed, then sharpened. The slide shifted to a map, fiber cables, signal towers, the invisible veins of modern society. When this framework is built without us in mind, what we receive is an inclusive version that exists only on a brochure. In reality, the connection is still slow, still weak, still left behind, and you cannot patch that with slogans. You fix it only at the blueprint stage. She paused. The spotlight lit her face, every line of resolve clear. What did we do? Something very simple. We measured, we did not guess. We mapped exactly where the gaps existed, in clinics, in classrooms, in small shops. Then we partnered with local governments and providers who knew every street, every alley. The result? Transaction failures cut in half in 6 months. Uptime rose, costs bent downward. And more importantly, those stories of resilience vanished. Because you don't need to be resilient when the system doesn't break you every day. The first applause rose, scattered, then spread. Arya raised one finger. If you want a formula, here are 4 things. First, bring the affected community into the design team, not as token advisors, but with veto power. Second, fund maintenance as you fund launch. Flash does not save lives, stable budgets do. Third, tie every dollar to outcomes people feel, not metrics executives want to brag about. And fourth, expose the gaps. Because darkness is where excuses breed. The hall stirred. Some people sat straighter, others scribbled furiously. Arya lifted her chin, voice lower now but carrying iron. You will hear 2 familiar objections. 1, standards. That expanding access will lower them. The truth? When more people are allowed to reach, standards do not drop. They rise, because only then does competition reflect reality. 2, cost. As though equity were the first time we ever priced anything. But we have already paid in lost productivity, in illness, in delayed innovation. Inclusion is not charity. It is the mathematics of intelligent risk management. The audience was silent. Arya paused, her eyes sweeping across them, then her tone softened. I want to tell you something small. I learned programming in a public library. The computers were old, the chairs creaked. The connection was so slow it taught me patience. A boy once asked me, "Is your work heavy?" I said yes. He laughed. Then you must not like it. He was wrong about the weight, but right about the love. Love is what turns the burden into purpose. The final slide lit up. White letters on black. Access isn't a favor. It's a fact. Act like it. Arya closed her tablet and looked straight at the hall. That is all. Thank you. A breathless beat. Then an explosion. Applause roared, strong and relentless, no effects needed. Some rose to their feet, some stayed seated. But it did not matter. What mattered was that the truth had been spoken, bare and unvarnished. From the wings, Priya Shah watched, her eyes gleaming, and in the front row, Charles Whitman tugged at his tie, his face torn. He had just heard the woman he once dismissed in seat 1A speak words that commanded an entire room to listen. And he knew. Tomorrow, the market he thought he controlled would shift in ways he could no longer hold. The applause still echoed through the hall, like the aftershock of a storm. As the lights dimmed, Julian Park, the program's moderator, stepped forward with a strained smile. He was used to wrapping sessions in velvet, but today the energy in the room had slipped beyond his control. "We have a few minutes for questions," Julian announced, his voice trying to steady. "Please." Hands rose hesitantly, then one shot up with force. Every gaze turned. Charles Whitman, suit pressed, silver tie gleaming, stood tall. No wineglass now, no smug grin, but the air around him was sharp, proprietary. He adjusted the microphone, his voice low but booming, crafted for the entire hall. "If the market has finite resources, Dr. Bennett, why should we prioritize expanding access instead of securing returns for investors who took the early risks? Why trade a certain future to appease those who haven't yet contributed enough?" A murmur swept the room, like fire through dry grass. Eyes fixed forward. This was the blade, and Charles had driven it straight into the heart of her speech. Arya stood still, one hand resting on her tablet, her eyes sweeping slowly across the hall. A silence stretched long, pulling the air taut. Then her voice rang out, steel drawn from its sheath. "The market does not have finite resources. It has allocation by choice. The difference here is not lack of money, but where we choose to place it." A few bankers frowned. Young faces sat up straighter, their eyes alive. Arya pressed on. "Profit does not disappear when we expand access. On the contrary, growth only happens when more people participate. If your model protects yesterday's returns by blocking tomorrow's market, that is not risk management. That is starving yourself." The hall erupted, scattered applause, sharp and cutting, enough to push her words into the air like a verdict. Charles leaned slightly, eyes narrowing. He was not defeated, but the strike had left a mark. Another microphone lit. A male journalist's voice came, smooth but barbed. "Some say your entire approach is just a front for so-called woke capital. Isn't this really about using equity as a tool to push political interests?" The air hissed. Some nodded in agreement. Others leaned forward in anticipation of her counterstrike. Arya turned fully, unflinching. "If efficiency means building for the largest market possible, then yes, that is what we are doing. If woke means awake to reality, then yes, I am awake. But if you think we are doing this to feel good, no. I can buy comfort for cheaper. Here, I invest in truth." Laughter burst across the room. This time, applause spread wall to wall, not polite, but united. The journalist sat down, face flushed red. Julian, swept by the current, cleared his throat. "One last question," he said, his voice slightly trembling. "Please." A young student stood, badge swinging at his chest. His hand shook, his voice stumbled. How do you remain yourself in rooms like this?" The hall froze. No daggers, no smirks. Only a naked question. Arya smiled, her eyes softer, her voice still steady. By remembering who sent me here, the ones not in this room, the ones who will never read a transcript, and by leaving the room on time. The hall laughed, and the laughter melted into a standing ovation. The sound rolled like a wave, filling every space. No command, no cue. The entire hall rose as one. From backstage, Priya Shah grabbed Arya's arm as she stepped off stage. Perfect. Not a beat off, not a word wasted, and thank you for killing the housekeeping slide. Arya nodded, her lips curling into a faint smile. I just kept Islands respected. From the doorway, Charles appeared, his expression transformed. No sneer, no disdain. He stepped slowly, his voice low. Dr. Bennett, I was wrong about you. Arya met his eyes, not triumphant, only direct. You were wrong about what you wanted to see. Don't confuse the two. Charles inhaled deeply, swallowing pride. If your team needs a patient capital partner willing to go public on results, I am ready. Arya paused, her tone even. We do not deal in whispered bargains. We deal in clear terms and measurable outcomes. Charles nodded, for the first time, without protest. I understand, and I am sorry. Don't apologize to me, Arya replied, her eyes still burning bright. Do better for the next person. That is the interest on an apology. Charles exhaled, almost laughing at the brutal fairness. Fair enough. He walked away. And backstage, once strung tight as wire, the air now held only the echo of applause, still thunderous outside. The proof that a woman once dismissed in seat 1A had just made an entire hall rise to its feet. The waves of applause from the auditorium slowly faded, but the aftershocks rippled through every corridor of the Geneva Conference Center. At coffee tables, in clusters of people standing by the glass walls, the name Dr. Arya Bennett traveled like a whisper, sometimes in awe, sometimes in concern. Arya stepped off stage with calm composure, though inside her heart still pounded with the rhythm of adrenaline. It was a familiar rhythm. When the speech ends, the energy does not vanish instantly. It leaks outward like residual current. She gripped her tablet tightly, reminding herself that control lived here, not in the applause outside. Priya Shah, the show caller, rushed to her, eyes glittering. You landed perfectly. Not a beat off, not a word wasted. Arya smiled faintly. I only held the silence long enough to make it heavy. Behind her, Julian Park, the moderator, hurried over, sweat gathered at his temples. Remarkable. You just split the air in half. I have never seen a hall react like this. Thank you, Arya replied, her tone concise, as though it was an acknowledgement rather than praise. As the crowd shifted toward the afternoon sessions, Arya walked slowly through the lobby. Eyes touched her, then darted away, some with admiration, some with calculation, and others hidden behind the dark lenses of plainclothes security. At the espresso bar, Ruth Delgado, the veteran journalist who had smiled the night before at Camilla's gathering, stopped her. Her voice was husky, half honey, half sandpaper. That line, the market protects yesterday's profits by starving tomorrow. I'll quote it. But I'll add the data. Don't worry, I don't chase cheap headlines. Arya nodded, gaze steady. Let the words go with the numbers, so they cannot dodge. Ruth leaned closer, lowering her voice. But be careful. I see shadows around you. Not all of them are enemies. But not everyone wants the story to end well. I hate when a story gets ruined by a bad ending. Arya's lips curved slightly, her eyes drifting toward the far hallway, where 3 men with blank lanyards stood as if gathered by chance. I know, she said softly, but once light has been cast, darkness is only proof that it exists. Later in the afternoon, Arya attended another panel. Not to speak, but to ask. Her question was simple, but it froze the speaker mid-sentence. Can you tell us where the post-audit data is? His silence told the room everything. Arya did not need to add more. One question was enough to leave a mark larger than any 20-minute speech. At the next session, she remained silent, listening. Yet her presence shifted the room, forcing speakers to measure their answers carefully, as though they feared being cut by a single question. By the time dusk fell over Geneva, the language had begun to change. In the hallways, people no longer spoke of opportunity as they had yesterday. They spoke of conditions. A small shift, but Arya knew it was a signal. She walked back to her hotel along the Rhone. A fine drizzle fell. Geneva's polite rain, not enough to make anyone run, only enough to freckle coats. She did not open her umbrella. She let the drops touch her, a reminder that even after stage lights, the world remained real. At the front desk, the clerk greeted her with a strained smile. Dr. Bennett, there is an envelope left for you. Arya opened it. A plain white card, unsigned, in neat handwriting. If you wish to visit the hangar tonight, it is ready. Contact this number. In the corner, a faint embossed symbol, the same mark she had noticed the night before on Alain Morel's lapel, the discreet man at Camilla's gathering. Arya turned the card between her fingers, the corner of her mouth rising slightly. Geneva had its own way of sending messages. We know who you are. We will remain silent, but we are always watching. She slipped the card into her pocket and stepped into the elevator. In her room, she brewed a cup of mint tea, the steam fogging the window. The city blurred in the reflection like a trembling canvas. Her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus Bennett. Watched the entire live stream. You are the cleanest flame I have ever seen. Arya let out a quiet laugh, replying, Go to sleep. I still have tomorrow. Another message came almost immediately. Be careful. Ops just flagged the reconfirmation incident from your inbound flight. Do you want me to escalate? Arya sat still for a few seconds. The matter was no longer private. It had been logged into the airline's official system. Not yet, she typed back. I will handle it when I return. A pause, then Marcus. I am proud of you. Arya set the phone down, her eyes on the city. Outside, the Rhone shimmered with lights, like streams of data flowing through space. She inhaled deeply, closing her eyes. Today she had spoken for millions locked outside. But tomorrow she would have to ensure those words turned into policy, into process, into code that could not be erased. Because applause could roar today. But systems only change when those shadows are forced to rewrite the rules. The Geneva sky was clear, blue and still as glass. That morning, Dr. Aria Bennett entered the airport with a small suitcase, no more than a briefcase, and the fast shoes that young Leo had once admired. She chose her usual spot, leaning quietly against the wall, watching the electronic board flicker. A message appeared. Gate change, A12. The crowd shifted quickly. Aria did not hurry. She rose last, walking with the rhythm of someone who knew she would never be late. The gate glowed green. A young airport manager stood nearby, attentive but not approaching. With just a small adjustment, the passenger flow moved more smoothly than usual. Aria recognized it. Someone had been briefed from early morning. The first-class cabin glowed with a soft light. Aria placed her suitcase in the compartment and sat down in seat 1A, the same seat that had once set an entire cabin aflame. But today, no one looked at her with suspicion. People were busy fastening belts, finishing calls. No one whispered, "Does she belong here?" A flight attendant approached with a genuine smile. "Still or sparkling, ma'am?" "Still, and mint tea after takeoff." The attendant nodded slightly, her eyes carrying a quiet sense of solidarity. Before the plane pushed back, Daniel Roth, the veteran purser, approached. He leaned down, voice low. "Dr. Bennett, I reviewed the log from the last flight. I apologize for the inconvenience you endured." Aria met his gaze. "Thank you, Daniel. The word inconvenience sometimes has sharp edges. You understand that, don't you?" Daniel nodded, eyes firm. "We reinforced the procedure. The team today has all been reminded. No one will be asked for reconfirmation unless the system shows a true technical trigger." Aria's lips curved faintly. "Good. That is the standard." He paused, then added sincerely, "If you need anything during this flight, anything at all, please let me know." Aria inclined her head. "I will." At 10,000 feet, the cup of mint tea appeared, just as promised. Aria held it, the steam easing the tension still running through her. She opened her tablet, not to write a speech, but to type a note to herself. You held the seat, you held the voice, you held the purpose. Tomorrow, audit the entire intake flow for reconfirmations. Publish openly. She closed it, eyes drifting to the stretch of grey-blue sky. Below were the cables, the invisible signals carrying the lives of millions. Every decision she made touched them. And she knew, today, a new policy would be written. The plane landed smoothly. The door opened. Aria did not walk through the crowded stream of passengers, but turned into the executive corridor. At the end stood Omar Haddad, operations manager, clipboard in hand. "Dr. Bennett," he said gravely, voice steady. "The policy you requested was implemented across the system this morning at 06 Hontuok." He handed her a one-page bulletin. Aria took it, reading each word carefully. "Know first. Class passenger shall be asked to reconfirm their seat unless the system registers a technical error. Any exception must be logged and escalated immediately. Short, precise, with no gaps." Aria pulled the familiar pen from her case and signed the corner. M. Bennett. A signature that closed a chapter of doubt and opened a new one for thousands of passengers. Omar exhaled with relief, his tone softer. "Thank you, and welcome home." Aria did not walk into the crowded concourse. She entered the operations room, where flight maps glowed across a wall like lightning veins. A young coordinator turned his chair, half greeting, half congratulation. "Good flight?" "Good crew," Arya replied. "Keep it that way." Through the glass, she saw fuel trucks, ground crew raising their hands in greeting. Small gestures, but truer than any applause. Her phone buzzed, a message from Marcus. "That bulletin looked sharp. I'm proud of you." "Dinner tonight," Arya typed back. "As long as there's bread, don't threaten me with salad." A heart emoji appeared, making her lips curve upward. On the drive out of the airport, Arya added a few last lines in her notes. Publish monthly reconfirmation statistics. Add bias, response drill to regular training. Send invitation to Amelia Price for summer program. Each line a small step, together forming real change. The car door closed. The city trailed past outside the window. Inside, Arya closed her eyes for a moment. Not to rest, but to hold on to the echo of this truth. From the seat once doubted, she had rewritten policy for an annual airline. To many, it was just an internal memo. But to her, and to those who would never again be asked, "Are you sure you belong here?" it was quiet, durable justice. She opened her eyes, looking out at the road. One chapter closed, but the next door was already ready to open. One flight, one seat, one doubtful glance, and then a policy that changed an entire system. The story of Dr. Arya Bennett reminds us that justice does not always come from courtrooms or parliaments. Sometimes it begins right inside an airplane cabin, where one person dares to remain seated, dares to hold their place, and dares not to bow under the weight of condescension. True power does not lie in a first-class ticket, nor in a metal card, nor in applause. Power lies in the ability to turn a personal moment into collective change. Arya proved that you do not need to shout to be heard. Sometimes, all it takes is holding steady to your voice and forcing the world to adjust around it. And now, the question is no longer for Arya. It is for you. When someone doubts you, when the system tries to push you aside, will you quietly step away, or will you sit firm and turn that moment into a new rule for everyone? If this story speaks to you, hit like to spread the message, subscribe so you never miss the next journey, and leave a comment with the words, "Stand firm," to show the world that you too choose to stand your ground. Because sometimes what changes an entire system is the very person who was underestimated most in the room.